My fiancé said I was too plain for his corporate party. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing the fabric of my navy blue dress. It was elegant and modest, the kind of dress a woman of my age felt proud to wear. I was 60 years old, and tonight was supposed to be the biggest night of my fiancé Liam's life. He was 42, and his firm was hosting a massive promotion gala. As he walked into the room, I smiled, expecting a compliment. Instead, he winced as if looking at something spoiled. He adjusted his expensive silk tie and sighed loudly. "Actually, Justina, maybe you should just stay home," he said coldly. "This is a high-level networking event. You are a bit plain. My boss's daughter, Sienna, is coming. I need to look like I belong in the inner circle. You would just stand out for the wrong reasons." My heart shattered. I couldn't breathe as I stared at the man I thought I loved. For 5 years, I had supported him. I had used my wisdom and my savings to build his confidence. Now, he was looking at me like I was a piece of old furniture that didn't fit in his shiny new life. He didn't wait for me to answer. He reached out and gave me a fake, dismissive kiss on the cheek. It felt like ice against my skin. "There is leftover pizza in the fridge," he said, checking his watch. He didn't even look back as he walked out the door, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. The sound of the front door closing felt like a gavel hitting a desk. I was alone in my navy dress, feeling small and discarded. Subscribe for more revenge stories to see how I handle this. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The silence in the house was heavy, but my mind was screaming. I had been the plain one who worked 2 different jobs to put Liam through his MBA program when he was struggling. I was the one who edited his papers and coached him for his interviews. I reached over and grabbed my tablet from the nightstand. My eyes blurred with tears, but they cleared when I saw the notification at the top of my inbox. It was an email from Global Zenith Corp, sent just minutes ago. The subject line made my blood run hot. "Madam CEO, the acquisition of Liam's firm is complete. Your arrival at the party is expected." I looked at my reflection again. The navy dress was for the old Justina. I grabbed the fabric and ripped it down the seam. I remembered the early nights of our relationship. Liam used to tell me he loved my simplicity. He said my calm nature was his anchor in a crazy world. But as he climbed the corporate ladder, his tone began to change. He started making little comments about my hair, my laugh, and especially my boring career as a freelance consultant. He talked down to me like I was a child who didn't understand the big, scary world of business. What he never realized was that my consulting wasn't for small shops. I was actually advising the board of directors for the largest corporation in the country. I was the one who suggested they buy his firm. He thought I was a housekeeper of a woman, but I was actually his secret architect. I had built the floor he walked on. The anger inside me was finally starting to burn away the sadness. I felt like a lioness waking up after a long sleep. I picked up Liam's old phone that he had left charging on the dresser. It buzzed with a new message. It was from Sienna, the boss's daughter he was so eager to impress. "Is the housekeeper staying home tonight?" The text read. "I can't wait to see you in that suit. We have so much to celebrate." My hands shook as I read it. He hadn't just called me plain. He had been laughing about me behind my back with a woman half my age. He was treating me like a shameful secret while I was the one providing his entire life. This was the last time anyone would ever call me plain. Plain was officially over. I didn't waste another second feeling sorry for myself. I picked up my phone and called my vultures. That was the nickname I gave to my high-level glam team and my lead legal counsel. They had been with me through every major acquisition for a decade. Within 30 minutes, they arrived at my door with rolling racks of clothes and professional kits. "We have a transformation to perform," I told them, my voice sounding like sharpened steel. We spent 4 hours on a total metamorphosis. I wasn't just getting a makeover. I was stepping into my armor for battle. I chose a dress of emerald silk that flowed like water and diamonds that caught the light like tiny daggers. My new heels made a sound against the floor that echoed like a steady, rhythmic heartbeat. I was no longer the quiet woman in the background. The transformation was finally complete. When I looked in the large mirror, I didn't see the plain woman Liam had insulted. I saw a titan. My silver-streaked hair was styled into a powerful, elegant crown, and my eyes looked fierce and determined. I pulled up to the gala venue in a blacked-out SUV that screamed authority. The driver opened the door, and I stepped out into the cool night air. The red carpet felt natural beneath my feet, not like something I was lucky to be on. I walked toward the entrance with my lead counsel right behind me. He carried the official merger documents in a leather briefcase. I looked at the security guard and spoke with a calm, cold power. "Let the guest of honor know I have arrived," I said. The game was finally beginning. Inside the grand ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the smell of expensive perfume and champagne filled the air. I spotted Liam immediately. He was hovering around his boss, Mr. Sterling, and that young woman, Sienna. Liam was laughing loudly at their jokes, acting like a hungry bachelor trying to win a prize. He looked so small from where I stood. He was playing a part, while I owned the theater. Suddenly, the heavy double doors swung open wide. I walked into the room, and it was like the air was sucked out of the space. The music seemed to fade, and the loud chatter died down into a collective whisper. The entire room went silent as eyes turned toward me. Subscribe for more revenge stories to see how this ends. Liam's drink nearly slipped from his shaking hand as he turned around. I could see the confusion in his eyes from across the room. At first, he didn't even recognize me. He saw the emerald silk and the millions of dollars in diamonds, but he couldn't connect those things to the woman he had left with a pizza in the fridge. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The power I was radiating was something he had never witnessed before. I didn't look away from him. I held his gaze as I walked slowly and confidently through the crowd. People stepped aside to make a path for me, sensing that I was the most important person in the building. Liam's face started to turn a strange shade of pale as the realization slowly began to hit him. Liam rushed over to me, trying to intercept me before I could reach the VIP section where the directors sat. He looked panicked, his eyes darting around the room to see if anyone was watching us. He grabbed my elbow, trying to pull me toward a corner. "Justina? What on earth are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath. "You are dressed like a crazy person. You're going to get me fired if people think I know you. Get out of here right now before Mr. Sterling sees you and realizes who you are." He was still trying to protect his precious reputation, even now. He thought I was an embarrassment he had to hide. I pulled my arm away with such force that he stumbled back. Just then, Mr. Sterling pushed past Liam, bowing his head slightly. "Madam CEO, you are early." "We were just discussing the transition," Mr. Sterling said, ignoring Liam completely. Liam's jaw dropped so low I thought it might hit the marble floor. He looked back and forth between his boss and me, his eyes wide with total terror. He tried to speak, but only a small, pathetic squeaking sound came out of his throat. Mr. Sterling turned to the board members and motioned for them to gather around us. "Everyone, I want you to meet the woman who just saved our firm from total bankruptcy," he announced loudly. "She is our new majority owner and the head of Global Zenith." Liam's face went from pale to translucent. He looked like he was about to faint right there in front of the people he had spent months trying to impress. I stood there with a small, cold smile on my lips as the most powerful men in the city lined up to shake my hand. I could feel Liam standing just a few feet away, shaking like a leaf in a storm. He looked absolutely broken. I turned my head just enough to look him in the eye. "I am sorry, do I know you?" I asked, my voice smooth and uninterested. "You look familiar." "Oh, I remember now. You look like the help we hired for the evening." The people around us chuckled, thinking it was a sharp joke from a powerful boss. Liam's eyes filled with a mixture of shame and fury, but he couldn't say a single word. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, and I was just getting started with him. Sienna stepped forward then, trying to reclaim the spotlight that I had stolen. She sneered at my jewelry, her eyes full of jealousy. She was used to being the most important girl in the room because of her father's position. "New money, I assume?" she said with a fake, nasty laugh. "My father has run this company for decades. You can't just buy respect with a fancy green dress." The room went quiet again, waiting to see how I would react to her disrespect. I didn't get angry. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply smiled at her and unbuttoned my silk wrap, handing it to her like she was a servant. "Actually, I just fired your father 10 minutes ago," I said clearly. "You can put that in the cloakroom on your way out of the building." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Sterling didn't argue or try to defend his daughter. He just looked at the floor in deep shame, knowing that his contract was officially over because of the mess he had made of the company's finances. He knew I held all the power now. Sienna's face turned bright red, and she looked like she wanted to scream, but she was paralyzed by the weight of the moment. I turned back to the crowd, ignoring her completely, as if she had disappeared into thin air. Liam was watching all of this, his chest heaving as he realized that the inner circle he wanted so badly was currently being dismantled by the woman he called plain. He had gambled everything on the wrong people, and he had lost. I was invited to take the stage for the keynote speech of the evening. The spotlight followed me as I walked up the stairs, the emerald silk shimmering under the bright lights. I looked out at the audience, seeing hundreds of faces full of awe and curiosity. I saw Liam standing at the very back of the room now, trying to blend into the shadows. I gripped the sides of the podium and leaned into the microphone. "Tonight is about change," I began, my voice echoing through the hall. "I am here to announce that I will be restructuring this firm from top to bottom. We have too much dead weight in this organization. We have men who think a suit makes them a leader and a plain woman is a liability." I locked eyes with Liam. The words "dead weight" hung in the air like a heavy curtain. I watched Liam flinch as if I had physically struck him. The audience was mesmerized, hanging on to every word of my speech. I spoke about the future of the company, about loyalty, and about the invisible work that keeps a business alive. I spoke about the people who are ignored because they don't look the part, while the loud and the greedy take all the credit. I could see the board members nodding in agreement, eager to stay on my good side. Liam, meanwhile, looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He was finally seeing the true version of me, but it was far too late for him to do anything but watch his world burn down. After the speech ended and the applause died down, I retreated to the executive lounge for some privacy. I needed a moment to breathe before the next phase of my plan. However, I wasn't alone for long. Liam cornered me in the lounge, his face flushed and his tie pulled loose. He tried to put on a charming smile, but it looked more like a desperate grimace. He tried to be intimate by reaching out to grab my waist, whispering in that old, soft voice he used to use. "Justina, babe, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me you were the CEO? This is amazing news for us. We can be the ultimate power couple now." He was actually trying to act like nothing had happened. He thought he could just slide back into my life. I stepped back, removing his hands from my body like they were covered in filth. The disgust I felt was deeper than any ocean. "There is no us, Liam," I said, my voice cold and steady. "There is only an employer and someone who has been terminated. You made your choice very clear when you left me at home with a cold pizza because I wasn't fancy enough for your party. You wanted a trophy, but you ended up with a titan." He started to stammer, trying to make excuses about the pressure he was under and how he didn't mean it. He looked so pathetic, begging for a piece of the life he had just insulted. I felt no pity for him at all. He had shown me his true heart, and I believed him. I reached into my small, designer clutch and pulled out a manila folder. I slid it across the glass table toward him. Inside were high-resolution photos of him and Sienna at a luxury jewelry store last week. There was also a transcript of a recording from his office where he called me the anchor holding him back from his true potential. He stared at the evidence, his mouth hanging open. He didn't even know I had been watching. "You wanted to be in the inner circle so badly, Liam? Well, consider yourself officially outside the perimeter. Forever." I leaned in close, so he could smell the expensive perfume he didn't buy me. "You aren't just losing a job tonight. You are losing everything." Subscribe for more revenge stories to see the fallout. Liam returned to our luxury apartment late that night, probably hoping to find me and beg one last time. Instead, He found all of his important designer furniture and his $2,000 suits sitting in a messy pile on the wet sidewalk. I had bought the entire apartment building through a secret shell company months ago, a fact I had kept hidden for a moment just like this. He was officially trespassing on my property. As he stood there in the rain, looking at his ruined life, a black and white police car pulled up to the curb. My personal security guard, a man I had hired years ago, stood by the entrance with a stern look. "Sir, you need to move along," the guard said. Liam was now a stranger in the house he thought he owned. The next morning, the news of the acquisition hit the front pages of every financial newspaper. But for Liam, the news was even worse. Sienna, who he thought was his ticket to the top, tried to stay with him at first. She thought he might have a massive severance package or some hidden wealth. However, when she found out that I had frozen all of his bank accounts for an internal investigation of expense fraud, she didn't stick around. She dumped him at a crowded bus stop in the middle of the afternoon. She realized he was no longer a rising star. He was a sinking ship. She even had the nerve to text me later that day. "Can I have my job back?" she wrote. I blocked her number immediately, without a word. I decided to make the situation even more official. I posted a public update on LinkedIn and the company website about the acquisition and the new direction of the firm. I wrote a post that went viral within hours. "In business, as in life, integrity is the only currency I truly value," I wrote. "I am purging this company of those who value appearances over substance." Every recruiter and CEO in the city saw that post. They knew exactly who I was talking about. Liam's phone, which used to ring with offers and invitations, went completely silent. He was now radioactive in the corporate world. No one wanted to touch a man who had been publicly shamed by the woman who now controlled the industry. His career was officially dead. A few days later, a friend sent me a photo. Liam was standing in line at a local Starbucks, applying for a basic barista job. He was wearing one of the few shirts he had managed to save from the rain, and it was wrinkled and stained. The irony was almost too much to handle. The manager of that specific Starbucks happened to be my younger cousin, Maria. I had helped her through college, and she was fiercely loyal to me. When Liam handed her his resume, she looked at it for 2 seconds before dropping it into the trash can right in front of him. "We don't hire people who think women are too plain to be respected," she told him. Liam walked out with his head hanging low. I decided to use my new platform for something good. I started a massive scholarship fund for women in the technology and finance sectors, women who had been told they were too much or not enough by men like Liam. The launch party for the scholarship was 10 times bigger and more glamorous than Liam's failed promotion gala. The most brilliant minds in the country attended, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. During the event, I happened to look through the large glass window of the venue. There, on the street below, I saw a man in a cheap uniform sweeping the sidewalk. It was Liam. He was working for a cleaning crew, literally picking up the trash outside my party. This was where the real justice began. I realized that Liam wouldn't stop trying to climb back up using his old tricks. He used the last bit of his secret savings to rent a tiny desk in a shared workspace. He started a consultancy firm and began messaging my most important clients. He claimed that he was the true brains behind my success at Global Zenith and that I was just a figurehead. He was trying to steal my reputation to rebuild his own. However, my clients were loyal to me, not a man they had never heard of. One of my oldest partners forwarded me his pitch email. It was full of stolen trade secrets that belonged to my company. He was walking right into a trap. I didn't sue him immediately. I wanted him to think he was winning, so his fall would be even harder. I leaked a fake, flawed business strategy through an employee who looked disgruntled but was actually on my payroll. Liam took the bait instantly, thinking he had found my secret sauce for the next quarter. He spent every remaining cent of his capital on a doomed project based on my fake data. He was so arrogant that he didn't even double-check the numbers. He thought he was smarter than the plain woman he had discarded. While he sat in his tiny office dreaming of his comeback, I was already moving the pieces to end his professional life for good. He was building a house on sand, and I was the tide coming in. Liam managed to secure a high-stakes meeting with a group of wealthy venture capitalists. He showed up to the meeting wearing a fake Rolex and bragging about his high-level connections at Global Zenith. He was back to his old, puffed-up self, acting like a king who had been temporarily misplaced. He had no idea that the VC firm he was pitching to was actually a subsidiary of my own parent company. I sat in the surveillance room, watching the live feed of his pitch. He was using my stolen, fake data to promise them millions in returns. He looked so confident, so sure of his own lies. It was sickening to watch, but I knew the punchline was coming very soon. Subscribe for more revenge stories to see the final blow. During the middle of his pitch, the large screen behind him began to change. It was supposed to show his brilliant financial plan, but instead, it started playing a loop of security footage. It showed Liam in his old office, admitting to a colleague that he had stolen data from my files to get ahead. The room went cold. The venture capitalists stood up and stared at him with pure disgust. Liam turned around, his face turning a ghostly shade of white as he saw himself on the screen. "You're not a consultant, Liam," one of the investors said, slamming his laptop shut. "You're just a common thief." They walked out of the room, leaving him standing there alone in the flickering light of his own recorded betrayal. I made a single, short phone call to the International Trade Association that afternoon. By the time I hung up, Liam was officially graylisted. This meant no reputable firm could legally partner with him without triggering an automatic government audit. He was a professional ghost. An hour later, he arrived at his shared workspace to find his belongings in a cardboard box on the floor. His lease had been terminated immediately due to reputational risk. He stood on the sidewalk, holding his box of cheap office supplies, as the realization finally hit him. He had no money, no office, and no future. I watched him from my SUV across the street, but I didn't roll down the window. I just watched him shrink into the distance. The final humiliation was ready. Liam's MBA had been funded by a massive private loan that I had co-signed years ago when I believed in his potential. I officially withdrew my support and notified the bank of his unemployment and legal troubles. The bank called in the full amount of $80,000 immediately. He had 48 hours to find the money, or they would begin seizing his remaining assets. He had nothing left to sell but his ego. He showed up at my corporate headquarters, begging the receptionist to let him see me for just 5 minutes. He looked broken, his clothes unwashed, and his eyes red from lack of sleep. When I finally walked into the lobby, he fell to his knees. "Justina, please," he sobbed, reaching for the hem of my coat. "I'll do anything. I'll be a consultant, a clerk, anything. Just help me with the bank." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. I pointed toward the public restroom near the elevators. "The janitor called out this morning, Liam," I said, my voice echoing for everyone in the lobby to hear. "The floors are filthy. Grab a mop and a bucket. If you do a good job, maybe I'll give you enough for a bus ticket." He looked at me, realizing I wasn't joking. He looked around at the successful, professional women walking past him, the same kind of women he used to mock. He stood up slowly and walked toward the supply closet. Liam spent his first day as a janitor scrubbing the marble floors of the building he once thought he would own. It was a special kind of torture for a man as vain as him. He had to watch as my new partner, a man of true substance and kindness, brought me a bouquet of fresh flowers in the lobby. My new partner kissed my hand and told me I was the most extraordinary woman he had ever met. Liam accidentally spilled a bucket of dirty water near my expensive shoes as we walked by. I didn't even flinch or look down at him. He was invisible to me now, just like he had tried to make me feel. He was finally seeing the world from the bottom. A former colleague of Liam's happened to walk through the lobby and saw him mopping the floor. The man stopped, shocked, and snapped a clear photo. Within minutes, the image went viral on social media with the caption, "From CFO to Moppo." The comments were brutal. People who had been stepped on by Liam in the past came forward to share their own stories of his arrogance. He became a meme, a laughingstock for the entire city. When he went into the supply closet to hide, he broke down in tears. He had wanted to be famous, and now he was. He was the poster child for what happens when a mediocre man underestimates a powerful woman. He had reached his breaking point. My legal team filed a final lawsuit against him for the trade secrets he had tried to sell to the VCs. We weren't asking for money, because we knew he had none left. Instead, we asked for a permanent legal injunction. The judge agreed easily after seeing the evidence. Liam was legally barred from working in the tech or finance industry for the rest of his life. He couldn't even work as a secretary in a bank. He was officially banned from the only world he cared about. He stood in the courtroom as the sentence was read, looking like a man who had already passed away. He had nothing left but the mop and the bucket. His revenge was finally complete. Sienna, who was now broke after her father was fired, tried to steal Liam's last $500 to buy a flight out of the city. He caught her in the act at a local laundromat, and they had a massive, screaming fight in front of everyone. Someone caught the whole thing on a TikTok live stream. They were throwing dirty clothes at each other and screaming about who was more of a failure. Their humiliation was now global. They were two desperate, selfish people who had turned on each other the moment the money ran out. I watched the video from my office, sipping a cup of tea. They deserved each other, and they deserved the public shame they had created. Liam tried one last desperate act to ruin my reputation. On the night, I hosted a massive gala for the city's unseen workers, the janitors, the assistants, and the cleaners. He snuck into the basement. He wanted to cut the power and humiliate me in front of the press. He thought darkness would hide his failure. But I had anticipated his bitterness. I had installed high-tech backup generators and silent security cameras months ago. When the lights flickered for just a second, the generators kicked in instantly, and the giant screens in the ballroom showed a live feed of Liam shivering in the basement, holding wire cutters. This time, Liam, it is not a civil lawsuit, I said into the microphone as the police arrived. It is a criminal police report. He was led away in handcuffs while my guests cheered. The court was not as kind to Liam as I had been in the past. He was sentenced to 500 hours of mandatory community service. His job was to pick up trash along the highway that led directly to my private estate. Every morning, I drove past him in my convertible, the wind catching my hair. I wore the same navy blue dress he had once called too plain. I wanted him to see that the dress wasn't the problem. He was. He looked exhausted, covered in dust, and holding a plastic bag full of other people's garbage. He would look up as I passed, and for the first time in his life, he was the one looking up at me. I was the one with the power, and he was the one in the dirt. A few days later, a famous reporter interviewed me for a national magazine. I decided to reveal a secret that made the whole city gasp. I told the reporter that the navy dress I wore the night Liam insulted me was actually a rare vintage piece worth $50,000. I told them I chose not to wear a loud label because I didn't need a price tag to feel important. He simply didn't have the eye for true quality, I told the reporter with a calm smile. The story went viral immediately. It was the final blow to Liam's ego. He had rejected a fortune and a titan because he was too shallow to see past the surface. He was a man who knew the price of everything but the value of nothing. I sat at my wide mahogany desk, looking out at the beautiful city skyline. I had reached the very top of the mountain, but I hadn't lost my soul to get there. I had helped the people who were ignored and punished the man who thought he could discard me. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a final text message from Liam. I am so sorry, Justina, he wrote. I see you now. I see everything I threw away. I looked at the message for a moment, remembering the girl who had cried in her navy dress. Then, I hit the delete button without typing a single word back. He didn't deserve my anger anymore, and he certainly didn't deserve my forgiveness. I moved on to my next $1 million deal. The camera of my life panned over my thriving office, full of hardworking people who respected one another. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the street below. I saw Liam standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the giant Zenith logo on my building. From this height, he looked so small, like a tiny ant on the pavement. I was the sky, and he was just a speck in the distance. He said I was too plain for his party, and he was right. I was the one who bought the whole building, so the party would never end for people like me. He wanted a trophy he could control, but he got a titan who owned the world. I am Justina, and I am finally free.